The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. Welcome, everybody, to Lovin' Baseball When We Were 12. My name is Ralph Tycho. I'm with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and my premier guest on this venture is Peter V. Trunk Sr., an old friend and a tremendous baseball fan. Welcome, Peter. How are you?
Thank you very much for inviting me, Ralph. I'm well. Pete Trunk will be good. Peter, whatever. You don't have to put all the. I put that in when I first got online. Right? Well, my son is Peter Trunk Jr. So in order for there to be no mix-ups, when I first got interested in being online and doing stuff on the internet and stuff, I made sure I put Peter V. Trunk Sr. But now, all these years later, it seems like I overdid it. I didn't need all those, extra baubles or whatever. But it's great to be with you, and this is a great idea for a show. I haven't been on Comfortably Zoned Radio in years. As you well remember, you started me on this endeavor on Comfortably Zoned Radio on my own show about the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Absolutely. And basically we're going to talk a little bit about the Brooklyn Dodgers from the standpoint of a 12-year-old kid. And can you put yourself in the position it was right before your bar mitzvah? Was your dad a baseball fan? How did you get the Brooklyn Dodger bug?
You know, that's very strange. My mother, believe it or not, was more influential when it comes to the Brooklyn Dodgers. It seems like my dad was a great reader. He was into literature and all the great books and stuff. He taught English literature. He was a professor, et cetera, et cetera. My mom, on the other hand, when she would be doing her little work around the house and stuff, she would have this radio. I still remember what it looked like. I don't remember if it was a Crosley radio, but it might have been a Crosley radio. She had this radio that was off-white. I guess you would call it yellowish beige. This radio and it was on MGM because she listened to William B. Williams and the Make Believe Ballroom, and it just so happened,
yes.
Right? And it just so they used to play songs by Sinatra and all the Ella Fitzgerald and all the great ones, and in the afternoons or in the evenings they would broadcast Brooklyn Dodger games. Whether my mother didn't change the channel out of curiosity or laziness, I'll never know, but she never did. So we used to listen to the Dodgers on the radio all the time. So it was really my mother who got me started on it. And then, of course, when we finally did get a television set, which took kind of long, all my buddies had a TV set before we did. But anyway, getting back to that, when we finally got a TV set, it was on Channel 9 all the time for the Brooklyn Dodger games, and we watched them all religiously. We watched them. And that's how I got into it. We used to, it was funny, if the Dodgers won, my mother and I would dance around the kitchen and stuff like that. If the Dodgers lost, I would be so down in the dumps if the Dodgers lost. And my mother she'd be doing the dishes or whatever. I don't know what she was doing. Maybe she was sewing my socks or something like that at the table. And she would look at me and she'd say, Peter, don't worry. The dumb Dodgers, the dumb Dodgers. In my house, since everybody was born in Brooklyn, the Dodgers were the Dodgers, the D-A-H-J Dodgers. And Duke Snyder was Duke Schneider. Okay, there was no R at the end of the name. His name ended in an AH, and it had an SCH in the beginning. Schneider, and that's the way. And this is before I was 12. I know your show is based on 12, but you know something? When I turned 12, the Dodgers turned towards Chavez Ravine.
Right.
So that was
exactly
1958. Right.
We are precisely the same age, and
there you go.
When the way I see it, age 12 is when a child is most passionate about his or her passion,
I think
whatever
so.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball notwithstanding, we were both blessed and cursed to have our passion and then lose our passion at such an early age. I'll ask you, who and what team did you gravitate to when the Dodgers moved to Brooklyn?
Well, I could never gravitate to the Yankees, and I don't think I even have to explain myself there. Being a rabid Brooklyn Dodger fan, you just don't switch teams to the New York Yankees. They were, in fact, before they were known as the Evil Empire, they were, in fact, the Evil Empire to all of us back then. But what I did was, and the younger fans have to understand that there was no such thing as ESPN on TV, and there was no such thing as the Internet, and you couldn't check out your Dodger scores until 24 hours later, and all of the baseball standings that you would see in the newspaper were always a game behind for the Dodgers and the Giants because they had played out on the coast that night, and their result of their game was not included in the mathematics. So you didn't know if the Dodgers were a half a game out or a half a game in first place or 3 games out or 2.5 games out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was almost impossible from the New York City area to follow the Los Angeles or the San Francisco ball clubs. It couldn't be done. It couldn't be done well, let's put it like that. So I did gravitate. You're going to laugh, and you're going to shame me for this, but I did gravitate to the Milwaukee Braves, and I'll tell you why I did. I did because being a 12-year-old, you want to go with the winners, and Milwaukee was a winner in 57 and 8, at least the pennants, and they won the World Championship in 57. But I also fell in love with their uniforms. The Milwaukee Brave uniforms were unbelievable. Their caps were 2 different colors, both red and blue. They had these flaps on their uniform pockets. You know how baseball players have pockets in the back of their pants? Well, the Braves, instead of just little slits like the rest of the teams had, you couldn't even see the pockets in the rest of the teams. You could see the Braves' pockets because they had these big flaps that had lines on them like navy blue and red, and it was so cool. Those uniforms were just incredible, and they had guys like Eddie Matthews and Joe Adcock and Henry Aaron and stuff. They were very easily taken upon in my heart, my baseball heart. I went right to the hobby shop and I bought a blue and red cap, and for a quarter you could get the iron-on M, and my mother would iron that on, and I would have the Milwaukee Brave hat and stuff. I really, really enjoyed the 57 season. 58 also.
Oh, the World Series. We've talked about this over the years. We both rooted for the National League in the World Series.
Yes, we did. And let me just explain.
We knew our teams were losing or leaving, and we were loyal to the National League.
Yes, we were.
Which explains the Yankee hatred.
Yeah.
I've come to love the memory of the Yankees as well.
Oh, sure, the memory. Sure.
Over the years. But notwithstanding that, we didn't give up on baseball. We didn't give up on the National League, and it's the Braves served us. We had a team to root for in the World Series. That the 57 and later the 58 Braves were terrific. They were deep. Every position had at least one good backup. I can go down the line from first base, Adcock and Torrey, and Red Shandings, who had been a Giant. At second base, Johnny Logan was solid. Matthews was a future Hall of Famer. The outfield had Covington and Bruton and naturally Henry Aaron. And there is no uniform that I like to remember Henry Aaron in more than the one you described before it was bastardized. They changed it before they left Milwaukee. The act of leaving Milwaukee was insulting to any baseball fan. That they were going to the South made it worse. It's only now that I've come to appreciate the Georgians for reelecting, for saving us from real disaster. If we didn't have the good fortune of having the Senate back, it would have been very, very difficult for Biden to get anything done. So I'm happy with Georgia. Took a long time to get there. Just want to say that the one Milwaukee Brave I got to meet in my lifetime was Del Crandall. He was a terrific catcher. It was good when Campy got hurt. He took over in the National League as the best catcher, hands down. And he was later in life a roving instructor and a catching instructor for the Dodgers. And I met him in Bakersfield, and he explained to me that Harry Hanebrink didn't pronounce his name Hanebrink, he pronounced it Hanebrink. Or Harry Hanebrink pronounced it Hanebrink. I don't remember which, but we talked about those great 57, 58 teams, and he was a class guy. So you were lucky to have a class organization to follow. When was your heart brought back to the Dodgers from 3,000 miles away?
Well, that's simple. The answer to that is when we had the technology to be able to follow the games as they were happening instead of waiting 24 hours to find out what the Dodgers did last night. And that made it simple. I will tell you this, although it was impossible for me personally to really follow the Dodgers in 1959 because of all of the things that I just told you about, I did follow them very, very closely in the playoffs against the Braves and the World Series against the Chicago White Sox, and I was rooting for them, and I did the same thing in 1963 when they swept the Yankees. So I did have, I did follow them and root for them in those instances. But I will tell you, going back to what you said about us being National League fans, rooting for the Braves against the Yanks and stuff like that. How about the All-Star game? Young fans today don't understand. I think, I may be wrong, I think they don't really grasp how important the All-Star game used to be. And it was like if the National League lost, we were devastated. But thankfully, all those years, the National League ruled, and they won most of the time in the All-Star game. The All-Star game was fought tooth and nail. I mean, when they used to get winning hits in the All-Star game, the manager would come running out of the dugout to celebrate with the guys. I mean, it was a big, big deal back then. And Yes, we were National League fans, but going back to liking the Dodgers again, what I did was it just so happened, and we're talking about 12 years old, after the Dodgers left, and I sort of liked the Braves and blah 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 and this and that. I was always a big baseball fan, but I was coming to the age. There was a kid that lived next door to me that was like a year or two older than me, and at that age, that's a huge difference. And he knew how to get to Yankee Stadium, and that was the only game in town for us. So my mother would okay it, and he and I would go, and we would take a bus, and we would go to the Port Authority, and we would go underground and take the subway. We'd take the A train to 59th Street, get off, take the D train to 161st Street and River Avenue, come up, and there would be Manny's Baseball Land and Yankee Stadium. We used to go. And we used to root for any team against the Yankees. We loved to go and see the Cleveland Indians. We loved Rocky Colavito. And then when Colavito got traded to Detroit, we went to see the Tigers a lot of times, and we would go in for double headers, and we would root against the Yankees. And that's the way I would, the baptism, because I couldn't go to see the Dodgers anymore. My father and my uncles used to take me either to Ebbets Field or to Jersey City's Roosevelt Stadium in the earlier days to see the Dodgers. And now the Dodgers were 3,200 miles away. So to get our fix, we used to go into Yankee Stadium and root against the Yankees. And believe me, it wasn't easy rooting against the Yankees with 50,000 people rooting for them. We would get ice poured on our heads and stuff from behind us and what have you. But I remember those games were great, Ralph. I'll tell you why. At the end of the game, you could go out on the field. They used to let you leave Yankee Stadium. You could walk out around the infield. You couldn't walk on the infield, but you could walk around the infield and then walk on the grass out towards the monuments. You could touch the monuments, for God's sake, and walk through the bullpen and out onto 161st Street. So, or maybe that was River Avenue, I forget. But you could actually stand in Yankee Stadium. Years later, I didn't know it then at the time, but years later, at age, what was I, 1965, 18 or 19, 18 going on 19, I would actually play in Yankee Stadium. I'd play baseball in Yankee Stadium, and I'll tell you what, if you were in the batter's box at Yankee Stadium, I'm talking about old Yankee Stadium now, old Yankee Stadium, not renovated, not the new one, old Yankee Stadium. If you stood in the batter's box in Yankee Stadium, if the center fielder bent down with his hands on his knees, you know how an outfielder gets ready for the pitch? He gets down and he touches his knees. He would disappear. You couldn't see the center fielder. And when he stood up between pitches, you could see him from his chest up, from his letters up. That's how humpbacked the field was for drainage, Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And the Yankees dugout was air-conditioned, and the visitors' dugout was not air-conditioned. And the Yankee Stadium, the Yankees bullpen had mounds, pitchers' mounds, at least one of them out there. You could warm up to two pitchers, but I think there was one mound. And the visitors' bullpen, no mounds. It was level.
Whoa,
I know. I remember all of that.
Any little advantage they take.
Absolutely. I remember being in the clubhouse. The Yankees, of course, were on the road when we played there, and I changed my clothes in Cletus Boyer's locker.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was fun.
6.
A lot of fun.
And
yeah.
Number 34 before he was number 6.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And can you name Can you name his two brothers?
Cloyd and Ken.
There you go. People stumble when it comes to Cloyd. They get Kenny, of course.
And there were 6 or 7 others that played in the minors.
There were.
We had incredibly large family. Ken Boyer was on his way to the Hall of Fame, and he fizzled out with the Mets. And if he had a couple of good years with the Mets, he would have crossed that barrier. He was as good as Ron Santo, if not better. But God, they were deep in those days. They had Kenny Boyer, Santo, Matthews, great third baseman. You have to remember, fans out there listening, when we had memories of a 12-year-old, there were only 8 teams in each league. So can you imagine, and maybe 12 farm teams per team. Can you imagine how deep baseball was, and how the National League and the American League were absolutely showcases for world-class athletes? That's not the same. That's not the same today. The game's been bastardized in many ways, but diminished. And the way it looks now with the major leagues and the minor leagues in disagreement, talent is going to be less developed in the future. Nothing is as good as it was, and that's my point in this show. We were 12, and whatever age you are, if you look back 12 years ago to when you were 12, things were better. Just sorry to say that this world has deteriorated in a way that I never thought I'd see it. And quite frankly, it scares me. The future scares me.
I don't know. Here's an argument against that, baseball argument against that. Back when there were 8 teams in each league, there were 165 million people in the country. And we weren't using anybody, when I say we, I mean the United States of America. We weren't using anybody from the Philippines, the Dominican, Japan.
China, for crying out loud.
Right, yeah, right. But here's my point. Years later, there's so many more teams. There's 335 million people in the country, more than double, and we're also getting people from all around the world to play in the major leagues. So I don't think it's diluted. I actually think the players today are bigger and stronger and faster and more powerful. They might be a little wacko in the head compared to back then. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean by that is that it seems like when I was a kid, and we are talking about that. We're talking about when we were about 12, circa 12 years old. The ball players, more times than not, would come from a farm. They would have an 8th grade education. They used to hit rocks with a broomstick. They used to throw old, not even real baseballs against the barn door to learn how to pitch and stuff. Nowadays, it's altogether different. Mommy and daddy get you a trainer. You go through all this stuff. So, and you're thinking about all different things. You're not thinking about, oh my God, am I going to make it? Am I going to be able to? Can I buy mommy a new farm? Can I get daddy a new tractor and stuff? The world is totally different. And you go back and when we were children, you go back and you look at Al Kaline, and you look at Rocky Colavito, you look at people like that, and you tell me, did they have, when they took their shirt off, did they have the muscle mass of a Puig or it? I don't know if I can agree. What I'm trying to get at, and I'm doing a very poor job, I think. What I'm trying to get at is that the world, it's different. It's very, very different. And I think why a lot of people think it was so great back when, the good old days. Give me the good old days. Well, when you were 10, you didn't have to pay any bills. You didn't have to worry about, are they going to turn the lights out or the heat off, or are they going to repossess my car or whatever. All you did was get up in the morning and pee and brush your teeth. Your mother would have breakfast on the table, and you would go about your merry way and do whatever you want. Sure, those were the good old days, but they weren't the good old days for Mom and Dad and Uncle Joe, who had to drive a truck, or whatever. I don't know if I can 100% agree with you. I can understand where you're coming from, but I don't know if I can agree with what you said. And also, I mean, look at if you got ill back then, you got tuberculosis or something like that, you just kiss your ass goodbye. You were a goner or polio or something like that. Nowadays, you can have stage 4 cancer and live for 25 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know if those were the good old days, Ralph, but I do understand your point. I get it. Don't think I don't. I do.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of it.
Let me clarify what I meant by the level of talent that we're seeing. Of course, the players are more conditioned. Today, their conditioning, their diets are better, their mm-hmm. exercise program, their PEDs or whatever makes for certainly a more talented athlete. But it's the skills of baseball that the little intangibles that are developed in the minor leagues. I'll give you an example. Maury Wills took 9 years of mm-hmm. minor league toutage before he came to the majors.
It's true.
And so players are they don't know how to hook slide. They don't know when to hook slide. Little things like that make for a more polished game. So you give me those skills as opposed to the physical skills, which when you're comparing era to era, you can't really go back and say, well, Pugh, for example, was better than Carl Furillo, or because he was more talented or, more physically blessed. You're right, it's different. But there's nothing that can replace the apprenticeship of minor league baseball mm-hmm. that went into the guys we saw when we were 12. They might have had 5-6 years of wartime, yeah. let alone time in the minors to develop. The average guy today, you're signed, you're either up or out in 4 years.
Yeah.
And baseball loses a lot of talent by rushing, by the pay scale. It doesn't compare to football in a lot of ways for these young guys. They need to make money today, not 4 or 5 years from now. So they opt for football and basketball and what have you. It is a changing world, but I don't think it's for the better. In baseball wise, the product on the field isn't as good as it could have been today as it could have been if these guys were able to get minor league training. That's all.
I will go so far as to say that I agree with you when it comes to the incidentals. You mentioned before, and you only mentioned one thing, but you could have mentioned 12 if you wanted to, like when to hook slide, and if you even have the ability to hook slide, if you even knew what a hook slide was. We can get into all this stuff. People don't know how to bunt anymore. I remember Duke Snider bunting in the World Series, for God's sakes, and bunting successfully in the World Series.
Mickey Mantle is an example. The drag bunt for Mickey Mantle.
Yeah, I'm talking about the sacrifice bunt. The sacrifice bunt. People, they can't do it today. In fact, they don't even want to do it today. The managers, if you took a poll of managers, they would say that they poo-poo the sacrifice bunt, because you're giving up an out. They don't want to give up an out. You know what I mean? They don't want to give up an out. So the new philosophy is, and they have statistics about all this stuff. What are the odds that you're going to score with a runner on first base and no outs? And what are the odds you're going to score with a runner at second base with one out, or third base with two outs? So they put all this stuff into a computer and stuff, and they come up and they go, well, stolen bases are out. They're no good. We don't want those. Sacrifice bunts are out. We don't want those. And you know,
hit and run. Hit and run is out.
Right, hit and run and hit. People don't even know that there's a run and hit. Now, there's a huge difference between a hit and run and a run and hit. When was the last time you ever saw a run and hit in Major League Baseball? I used to put the run and hit on when I coached in college, but everything has changed, and I think some of the things that have changed are for the good, and some of the things that have changed are not so much for the good. They're for the bad. But to just stonewall the whole thing and just say, you know what, everything was better back then, and all the players were better, and the game was better, and the world was better, and the country was better and stuff. No, I can't go along with that. I just can't. And I would be a phony if I said yes, I agree 100%, because I don't. I just don't agree. I don't agree, and it makes me laugh sometimes.
Peter, tell me the circumstances where you played in Yankee Stadium. How did that come to happen?
I used to play in. When I since we're talking about 12 was probably the highlight of my career.
Okay.
My final year in Little League, I hit a lot of home runs, a lot of extra base hits. My team won the so-called World Series of whatever. I was like in the little village that I lived in a place called Valesburg in Newark, New Jersey. At the time, I was like a legend stuff. You know, oh, Trunk did this, Trunk did that. So I had like a sort of a reputation. And then my father got me a job in downtown Newark as an office boy for an insurance agency, and I didn't have the credentials. In other words, back in those days, I don't know if you remember this, Ralph, you used to have what was called working papers.
Yes, absolutely.
You used to have working papers.
I always avoided getting working papers.
I never got
through my life.
Papers. I never did. So the guy where I was working, he thought I was older than I was. I was 6 feet tall back then. I'm 6'2" now, but I was 6 feet tall back then, and I was like 13 or 14. The guy thought I was like 16 or 17, and I worked there. I made great money. It was an unbelievable job, really, really good money. And what happened was when I went to high school, after Little League, I played Pony League and stuff, and I did fairly well in there and stuff like that. And then I used to play town ball and all that stuff. And there was this semi-pro team led by Tommy Harper called the Newark Cardinals, and they used to practice at Valesburg Park. And they would come into practice, and they would practice in uniforms. Oh, it was really a cool thing to see. It was really, really cool. And they were all black. All these fellas on the team were black. The manager was black. The coaches were black. The team was all black. And they were really, really good. And they had these really nice uniforms. And even though they were the Newark Cardinals, they had Cardinal uniforms, as you and I would know Cardinal uniforms. And even their hats were cool as hell. Their hats were navy blue with a cardinal on them. The St. Louis Cardinals of today actually wear them during batting practice. Instead of the STL for St. Louis, they have a picture of a red bird on a bat. That's what these caps were. And they didn't have the little belts in the back of the head. They were real fitted caps. They were real. I mean, everything was real. And I used to be in awe of them. And he comes over to me, Tommy Harper does, comes over to me and he says, you want to pitch batting practice? And I said, me? He said, yeah. You want to pitch batting practice? I said, yeah, I'll pitch batting practice. He says, okay, warm up. Now, here I'm warming up. Now, I'm as white as snow, right? Everybody else is black. I'm warming up. And he says, tell me when you're ready. I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, okay, go on out and pitch batting practice. I said, let me ask you a question. Do you want me to pitch batting practice so they could hit it? or do you want me to pitch batting practice like I'm trying to get them out? He said, I want you to pitch batting practice like you're trying to get them out. I said, oh, okay, that's different. I said, all right. So I get up there and I start pitching, and these guys are like tipping the ball and fouling it off and swinging and missing and stuff like that. So at the end of the thing, he said to me, would you like to join the team? And I said, I don't know. I have to ask my father and this and that. He said, sure, I understand that. So he took my name and address and phone number and all that, and I took his name and phone number. And I asked my father. My father said, sure, let me go talk to him. So the next night they were practicing at Vailsburg Park. We went down. My father talked to him, and he was very nice. Spoke to my father, told him, blah, blah, blah. Make a long story short, I make the team. He gives me a uniform. What it is my father would drive me down into Newark. I used to live in the Vailsburg section of Newark. That was up by South Orange. He used to drive me down into Newark, and I would get out and I would go into what we call a clubhouse. It was just somebody's cellar. And we'd go in there and we'd change into our uniforms, and then he would have these rented cars, and we would drive to these places. We'd play. I used to play where Larry Doby played and the Newark Bears. I played at Bears Stadium. It was called Rupert Stadium. Played in Hinchcliffe Stadium in East Orange. I played in all the old Negro League stadiums and fields and stuff like that. And we had one game. We played a prison, Trenton State Prison, and we go in, and no women were allowed. None of the fans were allowed to come with us. And we went in, and they read us the riot act when we went in. Don't stare at anybody. Don't look at anybody for a long time. Don't look in there, blah, 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 and this and that, blah, blah. So anyway, I started the game in the prison, and Tommy Harper comes to me and he says, listen, Pete, he says, whatever you do, don't hit anybody. Top of the second inning, I hit a guy right in the back. The place went wild. Oh man, they were going crazy and stuff. So anyway, we got out of there. We ate with them after it. After the game, we ate with the other team. The nicest guys, Ralph, you ever met in your life. Anyway, we had this. We had night games and stuff. It was funny playing underneath the lights. It was really funny. It was great. And then we played this team from Syracuse. They were barnstorming or something. I believe they were called the Syracuse Chiefs, but I wouldn't bet on it. But anyway, the game was scheduled for Yankee Stadium. So we went to Yankee Stadium, and we went into it was great. The Yankees were on the road, of course. We went into Yankee Stadium. It was a day game. Went into Yankee Stadium. It was like in late June. I want to say 1965, and it was right before I turned 19. And we went in. We used the Yankee clubhouse, and we went out on the field and stuff like that. It was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. I didn't pitch that game. I used to play the outfield and pitch, and I used to call myself the Jackie Robinson in reverse because I was the first white guy.
That team.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was really crazy. I played with them for like three years.
Tommy Harper went to Encinal High School in Alameda, California.
Yeah, I know. You told me that a year ago. That's so cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
It is for me now, especially with this story. Encinal High School is about 4 blocks from where I live. I walk down there, and Encinal is where Willie Stargell played his high school career. It's where Jimmy Rollins played, and there's I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it to you. The Willie Stargell Field behind Encinal High School is beautiful baseball diamond that keeps his name alive in Alameda. He's a big hero in Alameda, Stargell. They called him Wilbur Stargell Boulevard in Alameda, which is pretty cool. Pops was his nickname.
Pops, right. He hit the first home run at Shea Stadium, didn't he?
I don't know, but I was at that game. I played hooky from high school in 1964. The Pirates played the Mets, and there were about 19 of us sat together in right field. First game, and speaking of memories, we were getting ready for life. That's how I look at. At age 12 is significant because you're almost there as an adult, and
True.
The powerlessness of childhood is immense. You don't get to make decisions until you're a certain age. So those years that we're talking about, 12, 13, 14, can be very difficult years. And I think you'll agree that baseball saved you as it did me from, you had something to root for. The idle mind is the devil's playground. You didn't get in trouble.
I agree with
ball.
that 100. I agree with that 100%. That's true. Baseball saved a lot of us. I know you just said it saved you. It definitely saved me in Newark, New Jersey. At that age, it became an obsession. Remember reading and I'm sure you've read this 100 times. I believe it was Rogers Hornsby. They asked him what he did in the winter, and he said, "Look out the window and wait for summer, wait for baseball." That's what we used to do. That's what we did back then. We used to, we would play the odd basketball game or football game or whatever. We would, play out in the street or down the gym, down the corner or whatever like that. But we were waiting for what? We were waiting for baseball.
Waiting for the magazines to come out. The Dell magazines and Street and Smith, and get ready, see who's playing where, who was traded.
Yep.
Exciting times.
Yeah, they were.
Hey, this has been terrific. I couldn't have asked for a better guest for the premiere edition of Lovin' Baseball. Back when we were 12 and innocent. We're not anymore, but we were then, and it's nice to look back on it with you. Peter V. Trunk. You can get go to your settings on Facebook. You can get the V out of your name if you want to, but I think it classes it up.
Okay.
Leave it in there, but you have the option. How's that?
That's great. Always good to have options. I want to thank you very much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it, and it feels so good to be back on Comfortably Zoned Radio.
It is nice having you, Peter. You were a charter member, and we have all of your shows on Comfortably Zoned Radio, as all of our shows are all archived on YouTube. So if you want to go to YouTube out there, type in Comfortably Zoned, it'll take you to the site, and then any other, you type in names, type in Carl Erskine on Comfortably Zoned, and see who a 12-year-old boy at heart interviewed Carl Erskine. Tell me the experience before we get off the air of talking to Oysk on Comfortably Zoned.
Oh, my heart was pounding. I knew I was going to call him to set it all up. I had gotten the phone number to call, and little voices in my head were saying, okay, call at this time because it'll be that time out in Indiana, and it'll be this time in New Jersey, and you got to time it right, and this and that. And my heart was pounding, and I said, oh, my God, Carl Erskine, this is unreal. And as happens with a lot of other things, when you're really, really nervous about something, I mean, extremely nervous, you're actually shaking, you're so nervous. When it comes to pass, You're totally calm. I don't know what happens. I guess a doctor could explain that because I can't explain it. But you just, all of a sudden, a calm comes over you. And I did it, and it was successful. And I've listened to it many, many times, and it sounds very good. I didn't make a total fool of myself. And Carl Erskine, I asked him all the right questions. He gave me all the great answers. And like you said, it's archived. It'll be there after we're all gone. It'll still be there. And I have you to thank for that, by the way.
Well, don't thank me. Thank your own talents, your communication talents. That's where it's at. He made you feel at ease right away. That contributed to your feelings of not having to worry. It went beautifully. That one of my favorite interviews on the network of all time.
Yeah, it's nice.
Peter V. Trunk Sr. Say hello to Junior. He's the one that told you, Peter Junior told you to vote for Bernie 5 years ago.
Oh, yes, he did. Oh, yeah. Many times.
Was right. He was right.
Many times.
And I tried to tell you to, but that's all right. You're right. You got your middle-of-the-road guy, and thank God we got him. He's 80 times better than Trump was.
Oh, boy.
If he weren't elected, at this point, we'd be looking for ways out. The country would have been doomed. And I think it's going to be saved. I hear good things this morning, especially about the movement of the vaccine.
Yeah.
Getting it out there and getting it into people's arms
Sounds
is
good.
What's gonna. Yeah, it all does. Love going over When You Were 12, Peter.
I loved it. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you for having me. For having me having you, we having each other. This sounds ridiculous.
Absolutely.
All right. You be well, my friend. Say hello to Linda. Give her a big hug. And we will talk soon. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network premiere edition of Lovin' Baseball, When We Were 12 and Innocent. Peter V. Trunk, thank you again.
Thank you.
Be well, everybody. Thank you for listening. Happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.